Here at Blue Apron, we know exactly how hectic school nights can be. That's why we created Assemble and Bake. Delicious one-pan meals that make family dinner simple. Just assemble the pre-chopped ingredients and put the pan in the oven to bake. Then you're free to help out with that last-minute diorama. Shop Assemble and Bake at blueapron.com. Get 50% off your first 2 orders with code APRON50. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
Welcome to the 1905 podcast. Each week, Joe and I bring you our unfiltered takes on the highs, the lows, and everything in between, following the Blues from Gate 13 of the Matthew Harding stand. Let's hit the notes. Well, it wasn't pretty, was it? But it's finished Chelsea 2 and somehow Brentford 0. But do you know what? The first thing I'm going to say is, I said before the game, I would take any sort of win today. 1-0. Comes off the defender's arse. I really didn't care, and that's what we got. We got such an important win, and we'll talk about the performance, some of the concerning bits, some of the good bits, but ultimately it was just so vital that Chelsea won today, and we did. So team selection, obviously from Limousinia was interesting. I think it's funny, is it? We've talked so much, and all the chat has been that he would play back 3 and we'd see, all the analysis and a number of videos I've watched about how he played at Strasbourg and those kind of things. And in reality, actually, the setup that he's going with is pretty similar to what we saw under Enzo Maresca at the moment. He hasn't had long at the club to work with the players. There's so many games coming thick and fast that probably it's sensible, but effectively it's a back 4 with 2 in front, and then the 3 behind the strikers. So no massive surprises. I think when the team came out, the big one that we were probably most Chelsea fans worried about was Tosin. There was the little feeling that he might play today because of Brentford's aerial dominance and the fact they put so many balls in the box from throws and corners. And I know that Joe, in particular, when that team sheet came out, was not a happy bunny. But let's give Tosin his credit. He was only on for about an hour, but the hour that he was on, he was pretty good, actually, particularly with the stuff that came in the box in the air, where he did well. He did what he had to do. And yeah, credit where it's due with coming out of that game with a clean sheet. I mean, probably the luckiest clean sheet that we will get all season. But yeah, you take it. You take it. I mean, let's talk about the performance. It wasn't great, was it? It was not great in terms of actually controlling the game. I thought at times it felt like we were playing with 10 men. I'm saying that sort of towards probably the spell was around like the end of the first half, sort of the last 15 minutes of the first half, where you kind of hoped, having kind of got a goal a little bit off on the break, and I'll talk about the goal in a sec, that maybe it would wake us up a little bit and we'd start to come into the game. Actually, it didn't really happen. It just kind of got Brentford going a bit more. And the first half, you were sort of like happy when that half-time whistle went, praying that we'd come out a bit stronger. But again, the second half started and we just couldn't get a foot on the ball. And it just felt like a matter of time that Brentford would score. And that big chance that Schade had going through one-on-one, and got a shout out to Rob Sanchez. He made 2 or 3 first-class saves today. I mean, that one in the second half with the one-on-one was brilliant. He also made the one where, actually off Tosin, wasn't it, in the first half, where he reacted so quickly to keep that out. But generally, he was very good, Sanchez, I have to say. Having called him out in midweek against Arsenal, where he was the villain of the piece, he certainly rectified that today with a really good performance. But it just felt like it was a matter of time until Brentford scored in that first half. And you had that feeling that if they did score, we'd end up losing. A little bit like Brighton earlier in the season, which is kind of why I said it felt like we had 10 men, because in that game we were on the lap. But it was just a wave after wave of attack. And then once Brighton scored, they just went on and scored 3. But luckily it didn't happen. And let's give Limousinia some credit, because he made the change to bring on Andre Santos for Garnacho, which seemed at the time a little bit of a a strange decision, but actually it worked really well, because the second we put Santos in there with Casado, we just looked a little bit more solid and had a bit more control of the ball. Again, it wasn't perfect from that point. I wasn't watching it thinking, oh, we're a completely different side, but it definitely helped us. And it felt like once he made that change, we actually got Palmer on the ball a little bit more as well, because at times Palmer looked really off it, and he doesn't look quite right yet, does he? You have to say that in terms of his, I don't know if it's injury, just not quite fit yet, but he doesn't quite look the Cole Palmer that we know. But yeah, that was massive. Let's talk about the goals. João Pedro in the first half. What a finish. What a finish. Again, VAR. Well, the linesman, I guess, ruined it, because he couldn't properly celebrate it because the flag went straight up. VAR, good call on that one. And yeah, massive moment for João Pedro, who, again, is another one. I thought he was really poor in the week against Arsenal, but actually his work rate today, a couple of times when he was sprinting back, was excellent, and a brilliant finish. And then obviously the second goal was his replacement, Liam Delap, doing really well, closing down the keeper. And yeah, what a penalty from Palmer. They almost felt in that penalty the frustration that he has watching him, that you can sort of see he's not quite at the absolute top of his game. Is almost like that came out in the penalty in the way he struck it, because you could have two keepers there and they wouldn't save it, even if they knew where it was going. It was such a good penalty. So that was huge, and you could almost just about enjoy the last 5 or 6 minutes, thinking, okay, we've got it now. But yeah, it was a tough watch, I have to say. I think final thought for me on the game before I hand over to Joe was just actually pleased to see Sanchez going long, and credit to Liam Rosinia for reacting to what happened in midweek, where it just wasn't working. We called it after the game. It was a big topic, really, of the last podcast, about how poor we were playing from the back and giving Rob Sanchez too much to think about, and it caused us all sorts of problems. It was very notable today that Chelsea didn't muck around too much at the back and went direct. Now, it did mean that the ball kept coming back and we lacked control. So from that point of view, it wasn't great, but it worked today. We've come out with a clean sheet. Rob Sanchez was back to his 2025 best form, and this is really the form we've seen this season. So credit to Rosinia for not being stubborn, sticking to his principles in terms of us playing a bit more direct and coming out with what was, as I said at the start, just such an important win. I'm just relieved, I think, after that. Very relieved. Over to you, Joe.
Well, fuck me, we've won a game of football, but that was rougher than a badger's arse. It was eye vomit inducing. It really was poor to watch. The standard of football in the first half from both teams was pretty poor. I mean, Brentford were definitely the better side. There were moments of brilliance. Chris has mentioned João Pedro's goal, which was a fantastic hit, and reminded me of that goal he scored against PSG in the Club World Cup, where he just didn't think about it and just smashed it in the top corner. But he hasn't done that since. So, yeah, pleased for him on that goal. But other than that half chance which he took, there really wasn't a lot to cheer in that first half, other than maybe when Pedro Neto flew down the right-hand side, took his player on and put in a fantastic cross on Garnacho, managed to miss from the middle of the goal, which is quite difficult to do, particularly as a wide player coming in. You'd think they would train that, 20 times a day. And yeah, that was just, it would have put a real exclamation point on the first half, because we didn't play well and we should have gone in 2-0 up. And that's only based on the fact that Brentford had missed their chances before we had that one. So yeah, that was really disappointing. I think on the Brentford chances, they had plenty, and Sharda will feel like he could have had 2 or 3 today. Chris mentioned Rob Sanchez making a fantastic save in the second half, but my goodness, he sent Big Trove for a burger in the first half, and then for some reason just refused the shot and passed it, and then it came back, and Tosin then he's got an own goal, and Sanchez clawed it out, and it was just a mess. But Brentford had plenty of opportunities, and they will feel extremely disappointed. They've come to the bridge and really given us a good going over. And if that shot in the first half that clips it outside the post goes in at 1-1, again, like Chris said, you would have felt the worst going into half time, but we managed to keep that out. And then as the second half started, the first couple of minutes, we had some small attacks, nothing of great note, but I thought, well, okay, this is okay. This is better. And then after 2 or 3 minutes, it completely fizzled out and Brentford got back on top of us and we just didn't look like we knew what we were doing. I thought the shape of the team was very, very strange. It felt odd. It didn't feel particularly harmonious. Chris is right. It was a back forward, 2 holding players essentially, but it didn't work for me. And Brazinia's not had very long with this side. Chris is right. He's had a few days, really, and he's had 3 games in that time. It's an impossible job. So to stand here and criticise him would be insane, and that is not what I'm going to do. But you would like to think there were some subtle changes, and I didn't really see anything that was that positive. I mean, the football was turgid, really turgid, but I just think that's probably a sign of where Chelsea are. Okay, they beat Charlton the other day quite easily and they played some quite nice football at times. But other than that, we haven't looked good for weeks. So this isn't a Liam Rosinia thing. I just wonder how long it's going to take for him to put his stamp on this side, because we don't have time for him to have a pre-season and all the rest of it. He's got to come out fighting right away. And you just wonder, is there going to be a game soon where it all clicks or it all unravels? And I'm not too sure which one it's going to be. But I think overall my feelings towards the game were that we got away with one, for sure. Absolutely got away with one. But in the Premier League, you have to take what you can get. And at the moment, Chelsea massively needed that. It's put a little bit of a shining light on what was a fairly turgid afternoon. But unless you're a Chelsea or a Brentford fan, not many people would have watched that match today. And boy, oh boy, did we need it. Just one quick thing, which kind of makes me it's a bit puzzling, and it is from the sporting directors and the managers they've employed. You heard Liam Rosinia talk about his goalkeeper after the Arsenal game in midweek, saying that, I'm asking him to do things he's not used to doing, talking about basically playing out from the back and having a more kind of, if you want to call it, modern build-up style of play. But yet, we've now had 2 managers and we've employed a goalkeeper that can't play out from the back. Now, make that make sense. Now, I'm not knocking Rob Sanchez here. It isn't his fault that Chelsea signed him. But if you want to play out from the back and you employ managers that want to do that, why have we got a goalkeeper that can't play out from the back? That's what's criminal. And it's all very well Sanchez booting the ball up the field today as many times as possible. And also there was a few lads in our close WhatsApp group that were sort of saying they were pleased to see that. And to some degree, so was I. But in the first half, Sanchez must have kicked it. If he had 20 clearances, he must have kicked 10 of them to the other goalkeeper. This wasn't like good passing. This was hoof, straight up the middle to nobody, which I could not fathom or understand. Now, you might say, well, it's better than us fanning around at the back. I completely agree with that. But you're telling me we've got world-class players in like Cole Palmer and João Pedro, etc., players that can bring a ball down and play. Why the hell are we kicking it 90 yards to nobody down the middle? You haven't got Liam Delap to run after it. You've got João Pedro who won't really do that. That's not his game. So we've gone from in midweek, tippy-tap, getting it all wrong every single time, to suddenly monster it down the field as far as you possibly can to no one. And you cannot be paying Chelsea ticket prices and be paying Chelsea wages and all the rest of it that goes into it to have a goalkeeper that just smashes it to no one. And I'm well aware that in amongst all this, there's been a manager change and Liam Rosinia's not had time to really put his own marker down on how he probably wants to do things. He tried against Arsenal, didn't quite work. So he's reverted to, anytime you get it, Rob, just get it long. And somewhere between the two has got to be where we fall at, because you cannot make me watch that. Because that I said last week before the Brentford game that Keith Andrews plays this hoofball down the middle nonsense. And quite frankly, he looked like prime Ancelotti, the way his team was playing compared to ours. It wasn't good. It was poor. So even though we've won the match, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. We could have rectified the goalie situation in the summer. There would have been people available to us. but we decided not to. And I don't disagree with the sporting directors not paying 400 grand a week to Donnarumma. Okay, that's rumoured to what he's earning, somewhere between 350 and 400,000 pounds a week. I don't blame them for not paying that. But there would have been people around that could have done a much better job from playing out of the back, if that's what you really want your managers to do and your teams to play like, than just whacking it as far as possible and hoping for the best. I mean, we said Sunday morning stuff, lower league stuff, take your pick, whatever you want to use. It's not good enough. And it'll be very interesting to see what the next few games look like. Paphos, I don't know them from Adam. I don't know what they're going to be like. But you would expect that Chelsea can probably play a different style of game against them, perhaps, maybe. Palace coming up soon. You'd expect us, the way they're doing, their managers wants to leave. You know, their best players are leaving all over the show. You would expect them to maybe be on the decline slightly. And if some of their players have got the hump behind the scenes that everybody's off and leaving, they might not be in the best place right now. But we can't take, obviously, any chances of that. You need to see how the game plays out before you can start messing around. But I just wonder if we'll take the opportunity in these next couple of games to try some things. Because without being rude, that was just anybody can come and coach that. I mean, anybody can say to a goalkeeper, kick it 150 yards down the middle and hope for the best. I mean, that's not coaching. That's just pub football. In other news, Tosin. Everybody's expecting me to cane Tosin. But I actually thought it was the best course of action today. I think Fofana finished is a bit strong, and Chris will disagree with me there massively. But I think he's not much better than the rest of them, to be fair. He looks, because of his injuries and through nothing else, and no fault of his own. But I think Tosin was probably the best call due to the Thiago presence. And if he's fit, I would probably expect him to play against Mateta. So he may well get another run out, but who knows what he's done injury-wise. I think Tosin was very good today. For him, he was fantastic. He cleared a lot of weight that near post, and he did it with aplomb. He didn't kind of mess around and tippy-tappy. It was all good connections, good quality clearances. He headed away, I'd say, almost every header that came to him. He may have lost the odd little thing here and there, but I thought overall, Tosin was one of our best players today. So unfair. Trust me, I will tell you. If you play well, I will tell you play well. And if you're not costing us points every single week, then I will give you as much credit and credence as you deserve. Because if you're telling me who was the better player today, Tosin or Cole Palmer, it was Tosin by a million fucking miles. Cole Palmer looks like he needs a rest. And quite frankly, he's had so much of a rest this season, I just wonder if he's playing through injury, because he looks a shadow of the player at the moment. He scored a penalty. No one's really going to notice how he played. Chris, I think, has given him an awful lot of credit by saying that when Rosinia moved into the right-hand side, he was suddenly more involved and a bit more effective. He won a foul, and that's about as far as I can take it. In my eyes, he was nowhere near it today. He didn't seem to want to track back. He didn't really seem to be mentally switched on to the game. He made one brilliant tackle where he came back to clear a ball. I think it might have been Damsgaard on the edge of the box. He was just about to slap one in, and Palmer took up his toes. So from that defensive point of view, I like that a lot. But he's either out of confidence or in some way injured. I can't believe he's got that much of the hump with things that he's down tools. But you could argue this, if this was Enzo Maresca's time and he was still in charge, you'd probably say that Palmer's given up, because that's how he looked today to me. He was very, very poor. But what I will say is he can take a penalty. And that was one hell of a well-struck penalty to the corner, and no one was ever saving that. And in my little game of was Tosin better than, was he better than Reece James? Oh, yes. That's probably Reece's worst game of the season. My goodness me. He was terrible. Really poor. Out of position. Gave the ball away many times. Not once or twice. Many, many times. Looked knackered. Again, just looked knackered. And maybe they are. Maybe they are. And that is a fair and true reflection. They've played a lot of games recently, Chelsea. But we have to sort of bear that and give that some kind of credit, because I think we're not the ones playing Tuesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Sunday. We're not doing that. They are. But they are getting rest in between. And the more modern managers do tend to rotate their squads around a lot more than the ones of old, should we say that. So I can't come on here and be, Tosin's had a bad game, Bad Shield's not playing well, and then when Reece does it or Cole Palmer does it, just say it's okay because it's them. That's not okay, and that's not a fair way to report a match or how things have gone. And I think that you can also add Mark Cucurella into that. I think Cucurella's had a pretty poor month or so. I don't think he's been very good. Obviously, the red card against Fulham was terrible, but his general play I'd say in a lot of the games recently has been way below par. I didn't think he had a very good first half today. He maybe grew into the game a little bit. He tends to do some things where, like, for example, where his experience does count is when Brentford got a break in the second half near the, 70th minute. And for one that calls out yellow cards and unnecessary ones, there are times where you do need to break up play. You do need to trip somebody up, and Cucurella did that by stopping a counter-attack. And I think that was something that maybe an inexperienced Hatto doesn't do. So I think he's useful to have, but I do think that his performances have been way, way below his usual standard. And again, played a lot of football all over the summer, etc. Euros before that, yada, yada, yada. There's been loads going on, and none of this is an anti-Chelsea player take at all. It's just me saying, if you're not playing very well, you need to be called out on it. And I will accept an odd game. I would never really call you out. I think if you've had, maybe the exception of Reece James just then by saying he didn't play well today. I think Cole Palmer's been poor for a while. I think Cucurella's been poor for a while. I think Caicedo's been way below par for a while. He had a better game today, slightly better, I would suggest, but he hasn't been very good personally. I think, for his own standards, Caicedo always probably plays to 6.5, 7 out of 10, but Caicedo is in the 8, 8.5, 9 most weeks, and when it drops off, it looks poor. And there's no other word for it, really. And that kind of leads me on to our wide players. I think that Garnacho was okay today. I actually thought in the first half he was our biggest attacking threat without scoring. And I thought he was a little unfair. I think he's being very unfairly taken off at the moment. I think Pedro Neto is playing almost too much football, because I think Neto had a better game, I would suggest, in the last couple of weeks today, but he still did some maddening things, particularly in the second half, when you're just thinking to yourself, just hold the ball up, just hold it up and give that pass and go and get it the other side. But no, he just sort of holds onto it, and then trips up, falls over, and then lays on the floor, and you go, oh, God, what are you doing? And just before I go on this first voice note today, the corners from our corners, opposing corners, whatever, this has somehow got to be ruled out. This pulling and shoving and it's just crap. It's such a bad advert for the Premier League. All this pulling over, everyone slapping and diving and pretending to feign injury. People getting pushed in the net, people falling over. It's just a really, really bad look for the Premier League. You spend multi-millions, probably billions on this product. And you've got players in all Premier League games, not just the Chelsea-Brentford game today, all the games where they're just rolling over, pretending to be injured, and try and look for penalties, for VAR calls. And I think that is where VAR is also a real nuisance. It's because someone's just looking to be pulled. Sorry, the motorbike just going past. Someone's just looking to be pulled over so they can get a VAR check and then go, yeah, he pushed him, he pulled his hair, or he tucked his shirt, and they're looking for a penalty. And it's just crap. It's really, really crap. So please, can we look at this, the FA, because it's so, so bad. But overall, what did we learn today? Well, we learned that Chelsea learned to win ugly. That's one. We learned that Liam Rosenior is prepared to make defensive tactical changes when it was needed. And I think the commentary was basically saying that they felt as though the Chelsea fans were going mad if they brought a defender on, etc. But I think when the game needs it and it suits it and you're not playing fantastic, and he's only had, effectively 10 minutes to work with the squad, do what you can to win matches as soon as possible, and then hope to dear God that in the next few weeks and months you can build on your team and work on the things that you really want worked on. But win now. You have to keep winning now, and it's not his fault. If this is the start of the season, you can afford to drop a few points here and there against certain sides and keep in touch with everybody else. But when you're mid-season and you're already in 8th position, and if Brentford beat you, they go even further clear. If you start with such a bad look on your record, and it wouldn't have been his fault. So we learned a lot about Rosinia's I would suggest, his resilience today and being prepared to go, do you know what? We haven't played well, but we need this. We need it, and I need it. And I think that was really nice to see. And I think between Chris and I, we were sort of talking before the game started. We felt as though that he needs a run of games and he needs a run of wins. And this was going to be the start of it. Now, we don't know what the Arsenal game is going to be like next week, but in the league here, he needs to put a run of league games together. And no one's going to look at Chelsea 2, Brentford 0 in a few weeks' time if you've won 4 on the bounce. No one's going to care that he didn't play very well against Brentford. Okay, he just needed 3 points today. And by hook or by crook, a fantastic goal, like a bit of a snapshot half chance by João Pedro, rocketing in, which was incredible, by the way, and a Cole Palmer penalty, which was made by his substitute Liam Balak, who came on and just caused a little bit of panic in their box, has managed to salvage 3 points today and a 2-0 win. So, listen, it's a decent result. I would say a fairly poor performance, but overall, in the grand scheme of things, no one gives a shit. Chelsea have got 3 points. We move on to the next game.
It's Sunday lunchtime as I record this. I'm off the back of a wonderful Vets football match victory myself this morning on an absolute bog of a pitch. The standard of football played wasn't that dissimilar from what we saw at Stamford Bridge yesterday. It wasn't great, but we won the game, and much like Chelsea, in a cold January day, that is what matters. The comments are interesting from Liam Rosinia after the game yesterday, worth a mention, I think. He basically came out and said that both Reece James and Cole Palmer just hadn't trained all week ahead of the game. So I think that probably helps to explain a little bit of what we were talking about yesterday in our immediate reaction of both of them just looking really, really off it. I've ended up kind of going down a bit of a rabbit hole, actually, looking at Cole Palmer's injury and finding out a little bit more about it, because it is, by all accounts, a bit of a chronic issue and a really difficult one to recover from. They didn't decide to obviously do surgery. It's a groin and hip issue. He had about 3 months off when the injury happened. If you remember, it was kind of this rumour that he was struggling a little bit with it and was playing through a bit of pain. He had a really good game at Bayern Munich. And then it was that game of Man United where we made those crazy subs when Sanchez got taken off. And then we didn't take Palmer off at that point. And then he came off after, about 20 minutes. And that was the end of him for about 3 months. And by all accounts, he's got it heavily strapped up still when he's playing. Obviously not 100% match fit at all yet. And I kind of look at him and go, you've how much do you want to sort of force him through playing through this pain all season? We probably need him. We kind of need him to. But a Cole Palmer at 100% is so much different to the one at 70% that we're seeing right now. What I did actually like about his performance in the last half an hour yesterday was that, and Rosinia called this out as well actually, was his work rate I thought was really good. There was a couple of moments where he got good interceptions in, and he wasn't great. I mean, it's not the Cole Palmer we're used to seeing in terms of magic and things like that, and he's nowhere near that. But I thought his attitude was pretty good, and he just absolutely knackered at the end of the game. I saw quite a good clip this morning of him just on the floor in sort of agony at the end. So I think that helps to explain a little bit. And obviously Reece James in a similar situation this week by the sounds of things. It was a really interesting part of Joe Cole's book. I mentioned that I read Joe Cole's autobiography over Christmas. And Joe himself had a variety of injury issues throughout his career. And he talked in quite some depth in the book about the fact that when you get back on the pitch after an injury, that could be a big injury or a small one, people just always assume that you're fit. So it's like, Joe Cole's back. And you're immediately judged on, yeah, he's fit, he should be ready to go. And he said there were so many occasions where he'd be rushed back and he maybe didn't feel like he was ready and didn't want to play yet. And the managers kind of forced him into playing at Chelsea and at other clubs. And he said it's really hard as a player because you feel like you're letting the fans down, and maybe you're not giving basically what you know they're expecting to see from me, but you just physically can't do it. And he talked about examples where he almost couldn't even get, I think it was one example where he couldn't even get out of his car without being in chronic pain, and then still going out and, trying to play in the Premier League because the team needed him and the manager needed him. And I just found that really interesting. 'Cause I think we're all guilty of it, right? We kind of go, Palmer's back. And you might think, he may not be match fit yet, and he might only be able to do an hour and that kind of stuff. But I don't think I probably ever think enough about the fact that actually physically he's just nowhere near on it in terms of sharpness. And I think that kind of, particularly those players probably at the top end of the pitch, they're the 1 or 2% differences, aren't they, between being able to turn on the sixpence, come up with a bit of magic, and probably just like keeping the ball, keeping it simple. And you see it with those guys. I think you've probably seen it quite a little bit with João Pedro as well, where we've been pretty critical of him at times in the last couple of months and thinking, what's happened to him? He doesn't look anywhere near the player he did. But again, he's another one, but where by all accounts he's playing through a lot of injury issues. So hopefully we can manage the Palmer situation and get him through the season. And then the summer will be interesting with this World Cup. I mean, as a Chelsea fan first and an England fan second, there is a big part of me that would quite like to see him have a summer break and be rested and not taken to the World Cup. Because to be fair, he really hasn't had a break from football in a few years now. On the other side, if I'm Thomas Tuchel, I'm taking Cole Palmer, even if I'm not starting him, just to have him as an option off the bench to be a difference maker. In my view, even with all the riches of attacking options England have got, you'd be mad not to take him. But from Chelsea's perspective, they're probably kind of half hoping that he doesn't. However, to pick out a couple of other things that came out, I think Liam Rosenior has been, feeling sorry for him. He's been portrayed in the last week or so as a bit of a meme, hasn't he? I don't know if everyone's seeing this, but obviously a lot of his comments have come out. There was this quite amusing quote at Strasbourg where he talked about the word manage is man and age, and you're aging men. It's all a bit silly stuff, really. And there were rumours that at Strasbourg he'd done this kind of team building exercise with Lego, and even some really stupid stuff came out where they were making a point the fact that he doesn't wear gloves on the training ground so that the players can hear him clap. All this sort of stuff to kind of make a bit of a mockery of him. And some of it he brings onto himself, they're easy things to kind of meme and make fun of. And it's very kind of David Brent in The Office or Michael Scott, I guess, for our American listeners. And I thought he handled it really well. He called it out in the press conference. He said, we've got Lego later. And I'll have my gloves off for training. Don't worry about that. And he kind of just immediately made a joke of it. And I thought, do you know what? That's very well handled. Exactly the right thing to do. Let's not take it too seriously. Football is, as a business, just I think sometimes is taken too seriously now. We're all guilty of it, but I think the media more than anything, there isn't an element of fun a lot of the time. And I thought the fact that he did kind of call it out in a funny way and just say, this is nonsense. I read the article, it made me laugh, but I don't know where a lot of this stuff's coming from. I thought was very good and a good way of kind of like trying to nip that in the bud a little bit. He was also very honest in post-match about the performance. He said he liked the work rate, but he said it was far from... we were not playing our free-flowing football, I think was the phrase he used. He said we're far off that at the moment. It's about winning games and trying to build a bit of that confidence again, which, to be fair to him, he's right. I mean, you see it. I think I hadn't really realised just how bad our form would be. I think we'd felt it, but going into the game, so Chelsea had won 3 in the last 13, and 2 of those were against Charlton and Cardiff. That's how bad our run was, and we've all been frustrated with it. But you think as a playing group, the confidence must have taken a significant whack. So it really is about just getting a bit of momentum going again, just winning some games, getting used to that feeling again, and hopefully then over time he'll have time to put his ideas in the group, and we'll start seeing the kind of football that we're expecting and that he certainly, I think, will want to bring into the group. But at the moment in the Premier League, you've just got to grind out wins. I don't think this is the most attractive Premier League season of all time. In fact, it might be the worst. It genuinely might be in terms of the kind of... I mean, I don't know how many games you watch. I watched quite a few games of all different of other teams in the league, and the way to win in this league is you've got to be physical, you've got to be good on your set pieces and get all your details right. You see it time and time again. whoever's playing. And I think that is the state of this year, which is why, to be honest, I think Arsenal will end up winning the league pretty comfortably, because they are physically probably the best side, certainly the best on set pieces, defensively the best. And I think that's how you win the league this year. We're in that era right now. Which I guess brings me on to the final thing I wanted to talk about before handing over to Joe, which was the transfer talk. But I think there's two big ones to talk about for me this week. One is the centre back. So obviously it's come out that Chelsea are looking to bring in a centre back in January. The big rumour, as I record now, is that it's going to be Jeremy Jacquet, who is a centre back in France. We love those after Betty Shield and Disassi. I guess you could say Fofana as well, but we love buying for France. He plays for Rennes. He's a 6'2", right-footed, ball-playing centre back. And yes, you're waiting for the big bit of this, which is he is 20 years old. And that's the bit, isn't it? That's the bit that, as a Chelsea fan base, there were protests obviously ahead of the game yesterday. And that's the bit where you look at and go, oh, he could be, an absolute Rolls Royce. He could be the next William Gallas. He could be absolutely fantastic. But you just look at it and go, what we're crying out for is a bit of leadership and experience at the back. And yeah, I mean, obviously, if we sign him, then I very much hope he's as highly rated as everyone says, and he really kind of hits the ground running and is as good as obviously Chelsea think he could be. But you look at it and go, oh, from a PR point of view, why not go out and get someone in with a bit of experience to just quieten down the noise around the club, to help us as a Premier League team just to be more effective and shut out these difficult teams to play against. And I think sometimes it's not just about, how good he is, 6'2", he could be brilliant in the air, all that kind of stuff. Sometimes it's about organisation and the basics. I would really like us to be looking at someone from the Premier League. And I thought I'd felt good. I was thinking this actually, it's one of the reasons I really like the Pedro Neto signing last summer, because it was like, okay, Premier League proven. Neto's had his ups and downs, but I think generally we'll look at him, and I think most people agree he's been a very good signing for Chelsea. But you kind of excited by that. You thought he's been really good for Wolves. He's always caused us problems, and you like that idea that he knows the Premier League. We know he can play at Premier League level. You look at what Man City have done or will do this January, bringing in Semenyo and Mark Guéhi, and you look at that and go, yeah. They look at Semenyo's hit the ground running. Mark Guéhi, you will assume, will do the same, and there's no question in your mind that they're obviously Premier League ready. I just worry with this, again, it's just taking us down the same old path, and again, he could be brilliant. I'm sure for all the scout reports I've read, rate him very, very highly, but you think it's not just about the football stuff on the pitch. There's more to football than just that. It's the organisation, it's leadership, it's all these other parts as well. And it's frustrating, isn't it? I think, unfortunately. But we'll see. We'll see what happens there. And then the other thing I thought was worth a mention was Enzo Fernandez. So quite a lot of rumours came out after the Arsenal game linking him to PSG. And sometimes, there is no smoke without fire. And I think this one is worth mentioning. He changed agents in December 2025, certainly last month. It's not too dissimilar to, obviously, Enzo Maresca, who also changed agents. Extra little detail on Fernandez is that he changed to a new agency run by Javier Pastore, the former PSG Argentinian midfielder, of course. I think that's probably where these sudden links have gone to PSG. And I've said on the podcast a couple of times in the last year that I've just always had this feeling about Enzo Fernandez that he's not a 10-year Chelsea player. I've just always had this feeling that he would end up moving to a Real Madrid or a PSG. I don't know why. I can't tell you why. I've just always had this thought that I thought I could see Caicedo having 10 years at Chelsea. I just never could see it with Enzo. So I think that's a rumour to watch. I don't think it will happen in January, but I think it could be one to watch in the summer. And I think we'll split Chelsea fans right down the middle. I think most of us have been won over by Enzo now. I certainly have, personally. I think I've had my doubts at times, but I think I look at what he does now, his end product, his passing generally. I think he's got better physically, and I think he has become, clearly a real leader in the group, and you see it on the pitch that he's got a lot of fight, and there's a lot about him that I really like. On the other hand, if we could get, near enough what we paid for him, I'd want to hit that. I'd want to hit 100 million if we can. If we could get that for him, and if we invested it in the right area, there's always been this part of me that has felt that when we bought in Caicedo and Enzo as a duo, really at a very similar time, that we went very small in terms of for the Premier League. And I think that's it. I think sometimes it's not just about building a great squad of excellent footballers, but actually building a squad for the league that you play in. And I look at the four that we've got at the moment: Caicedo, Enzo, Lavia. You're going to laugh. Okay, Lavia if he's fit. Andre Santos. And you could argue now Reece James as well as our midfield options, all five of them. None of them are over, 5'9", 5'10", I'd have to check. But none of them are certainly aerially dominant. And you look at again, I talked earlier about Premier League, you look at people like Rodri at Man City, Rice at Arsenal, so many others that you could name. And Liverpool the same. These are the teams that are physically dominant. And Chelsea used to be that, right? And I don't want to hark back, but your Ballack Lampard era, we're like, no one is bullying us. I'm not saying that Caicedo and Enzo necessarily get bullied all the time, but I think physically, certainly Enzo, you do see it sometimes in certain games, just to think, I wonder if we've not quite got the makeup quite right in there. So we'll see. It'll be 1-1 for the summer. Again, with Chelsea, you do worry a little bit on what the message would send out if we were to sell one of the, the big assets, if you like, what that would mean. And then you kind of worry like how we'd replace him, don't you? Would we replace him with the right kind of player? Would it be more buying youngsters with that price, with the money? I don't know. Interested to get your thoughts on Enzo. Drop us an email at hello@1905podcast.com or message us on Instagram, which is 1905pod. And yeah, I'll hand over to Joe for final thoughts this week. And we'll be back obviously after the Paphos game on Wednesday. But David Luiz, Paphos, I'm really hoping he does play, by the way, for them. He will get a brilliant reception, I'm sure, back at Stamford Bridge. Anyone from that 2012 Champions League winning team is a legend in my books, and David Luiz, yeah, what a great player he was for us. A lot of fun. He had his moments, of course, not always perfect, but overall, when I look at him, he just brings a smile to my face thinking of his time at Chelsea. Over to you, Joe.
Yes, I think I'll probably follow down the line of Chris this week with my second voice note and sort of speak about some of the transfer news that's been happening. I think we've done the Brentford game to its entirety now, and not a lot more to say. We're still obviously very pleased with the 3 points, but like Chris said with Liam Rosenior's post-match press conference, that yes, the performance was seriously sadly lacking, but like we've said, there's a lot to chew on for him. He's only been in the building a few moments, and to try and implement his style of play is going to be difficult in a matter of days, So I think we should all give him a little bit of leeway there. I think what I'm struggling with slightly is the transfer that's incoming, that sounds like it's incoming and quite close, which is the centre-back Jeremy Jacquet, I think it's how you say anyway, from France, a 20-year-old centre-back that you'd like to think that Liam Rosenior has seen playing in France for the last sort of 18 months. And you'd like to think that the club have done their due diligence on this guy. And I think it's very easy to come on here and slag him off and say that he's 20 years old, has no experience, and all the rest of it. I think what we need to do is let him, if he does come, is let him play before we judge him and see what he's got. Because you just never know. I think it'd be very, very quick and very presumptuous of me and Chris and anybody else that follows Chelsea to say that he's no good and he's utterly useless. Who's to say he's not incredible and he's exactly what we need? So I think we should probably just maybe stop there in terms of that. On the other hand, I think I would suggest this transfer is going to be extremely dangerous for the sporting directors, because if they think they can go and slap 50 million quid on a 20-year-old centre-back from France, which they've just gone and bought Disassi and Badiashile from, who have been a complete and utter disaster. If they get this wrong, I think their reputation to some degree will be questioned and will be on the line, because you could have easily gone and got someone with experience, like Chris has mentioned, from the Premier League or another league maybe, to slot in here, either in the summer or now. But they've chosen to basically double down and say, we don't give a fuck what anyone else thinks. We're going to do it our way, and that's the only way we're going to do it. And that's all well and good. But at the moment, even though some of the signings that you've made have been fairly successful to a point, a lot of them have not. But I think what I would say is some of those ones that haven't quite hit yet might be more successful if you had some experience in there. And I think this is the point, is that some of the young guys would be crying out for just a little bit of help. And I think you're maybe doing yourselves a little bit of a disservice by not doing that. And I don't see why you're putting two fingers up to the fan base by saying, we don't care what you think. We're going to do whatever we want to do. To me, by having even just one player in there with proper experience, or two players in there with proper experience, why does that mean that you can't go and buy a younger guy? Nobody's saying you can't do that. But by completely dismissing what your fan base would like you to do, and I'm sure some of those players in the dressing room would like you to do, just for example, right? It's a long shot and you'd never get him, okay? But just say Virgil van Dijk was available and Liverpool wanted to shop him this transfer window. Are you telling me that Cole Palmer, Rob Sanchez, Pedro Neto, they wouldn't be looking and going, bloody hell, boys, that's a hell of a signing. Fair play, I'm well impressed with that. Bloody hell. I think we can win the league now. That's the sort of lift that sort of signing would give you. Now, if you think Jeremy Jacquet is going to walk in the building and everyone's going to go, who the fucking hell is this bloke? You know, in one training session, and they might be like persuaded to say, oh yeah, actually he's really, really good. But he still comes with no clout and no presence, if you want to call it that, of someone that's achieved anything in the game. He's just another young player, another one off the conveyor belt where you go, who is this guy? You can walk past him, literally walk past him in the corridor and be like, oh, I thought this guy was here to pack the bags up or, you know, make the tea, because you just wouldn't have any clue. And I think this is a really, really brave transfer from Chelsea and their sporting directors, because the fan base is, I think there's a lot of people my age and older, and so I'm 42, and there's a lot of people older than me that are just feeling a little bit disrespected in terms of what they're doing. And it's not a case of, please don't go and buy that brilliant young Cole Palmer or that brilliant young Esteval. Because if you can do that with those players, then you'd 100% go and buy Cole Palmer for 40 million and Esteval for about 40 million. Of course you'd do those deals, but they need help around them. And I think it's pretty much proven that our average age of squad has never won the Premier League and never likely to win the Premier League. It's always been a couple of years or 3 years higher than we currently sit. And those are, I suppose, where my biggest worries lie. And it may well be the only business we do in this window. Chris has mentioned there, Enzo Fernandez, the links to PSG. I can see it happening. I think the sort of heavy rumour, maybe to be one to watch in the summer, is obviously Elliot Anderson at Nottingham Forest as a key cog, and I think he will move. And I think it'll be a case of, do we all let Man City go and buy him? Because it seems to be that anyone at the moment that's available, they seem to go and get. And I think Chris mentioned there that Semenyo and Mark Gay, etc., Donnarumma, they're not like, they're good signings. They don't really make sense for Man City. It feels a little bit scattergun. But it's like Championship Manager. Someone's available, so they just go, okay, yeah, we'll get him because we can afford him, opposed to where does he fit? And I didn't really see Donnarumma as a Man City Pep Guardiola type of player, if I'm honest. I think Mark Gay, he sort of scratches an itch because they've got injuries. Semenyo, they've obviously got lots of wide players and what have you there, but maybe what Pep thinks he needs is an injection of ability and someone to maybe put pressure on the players that he already has. I think that's more of what he's there for, and that's not to suggest that Semenyo's not good. He is good, but I find it a bit of an odd transfer. But Man City, I think, know that this is probably Pep Guardiola's last season, and maybe they're just trying to give him one last swan song before he swiftly exits, maybe before these 107 charges become 115 charges. They're sort of alleged to have broken rules, maybe come to fruition. So we'll see what happens. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to be done, maybe in the summer, but I think at the moment, this signing of a new centre-back, which almost seems weird because you had Enzo Maresca pretty much demanding a centre-back in the summer when Levi Colwill injured, and the club basically refuting it immediately and saying, we don't need one. And then Liam Rosenior, who's been in the job 5 minutes, has suddenly potentially been handed the keys to a new one. And like I say, I cannot profess to know anything about him. And I think you're going to sort of see this with Chelsea players at the moment. You don't know too much about them because they're all so young and they haven't had a career. You know, when Chelsea was buying Joe Cole, for example, Michael Ballack, Claude Makelele, you know, you knew they'd had a career. They'd had places they'd been, and you knew what you were getting. Yeah, Ashley Cole from Arsenal. Oh, there we go. This is a fantastic player. You just knew you were buying a ready-made player to come into that side, learn tactics quickly because they've got an emotional intelligence and a tactical brain. But with these guys, who knows? We are simply throwing as many darts at a wall at the moment and hoping that one of them hits the treble 20. And I think that I just worry that we're going to make another disastrous signing for 50 million quid, which is not to be sneezed at, by the way. That's a lot of money for someone we've never heard of, and hope that he becomes a good player. So, yeah, I think the window is going to be hotting up towards the end. If Chelsea do get the transfer over the line in the next few days, which it sounds like it's pretty close, I just wonder, will they do anything else? Or will that be them done and dusted? Time will certainly tell, but I just think there's a few jobs here, maybe, on the line.
Those were the Chelsea notes for this week. If you enjoyed the podcast, do us a favour and share it with a fellow Blue. And we'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave us a review wherever you're listening. Wherever you may be, stay carefree, and remember, every little thing's gonna be alright.